You know, we as black people, at one point or another, we always had a voice speaking up for us. One voice would fight for us, while another voice would reason for us. Some voices even carried our anger and frustration. Rarely were there any voices there to lead us, but when there were, they never bit their tongue. There used to be pride in that, and now it's called disrespect. I used to think we needed a new voice. Then I realized we have our own. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Antonio Kai.
And I'm your co-host, Brandon.
And today, the show was recorded on September 10th, 2015. And today we're going to be talking about masculinity. But before we do, let us say hi. We miss you guys. We know we've been gone for a few months, 4 or 5 months. It's been a long time.
Yeah, it's definitely been a while. But, you know, just as Antonio said in his update, life kind of came around and threw us a couple curveballs. But, you know, we're back and we're trying to get back in the swing of things. We got a couple new things lined up, especially since we're not going to be doing the show weekly anymore. Well, that's, I guess, item number one. No more weekly shows. On top of that, we're looking to do a couple mini episodes. They wouldn't be episodes on their own. They would be more like
informative show, or we can call it like a prep show. Let's call it a prep show.
It's kind of like when we analyze our material, like our source material, when we're getting this information from. So if we read a book, we'll analyze it and we'll talk about it. We'll have a short discussion and we'll release that as like episode number point whatever. So like if we did an episode based off of the masculinity sources that we pulled, then we would call it episode 3.1 or 3.2 or 3 point whatever.
The sub episode will always be in a point. The way you can indicate whether it's a sub episode or a regular episodes are going to be whole numbers. Sub episodes are going to be point numbers, and they can either consist of an article that we read, or books, or just us discussing things that we feel will probably not make it onto a regular episode, but we still feel this information is important to share with you.
Exactly. Plus, it opens up a whole nother variety of discussion, especially if we miss it when we're talking about it in our normal episodes. So it's something a little more specific, and I actually think you guys are going to like it a little more if you guys are following along and wondering where we get some of our information from.
If you're new to this will help you understand what we're talking about. It'll probably allow for a much deeper conversation. I mean, there's so much that can be done by doing this, so this is something we're going to be working on. And also, it'll give you guys something while we are studying for the next episode, if, you know.
Yeah, some kind of sustenance to keep you going for a little bit.
Just making this episode alone, we came across, gaps in our own knowledge, and like I said in the update, we had to get informed.
Right. So let's get on in this. Like Antonio said already, this is episode 3. We're talking about black masculinity. And it's really important that we make that distinction. Like, we're not just talking about masculinity in general. There's been plenty of studies on that already, but especially as the show is called The Illusion of Ebony, you have to talk about black masculinity specifically as its own thing.
Yes.
Now, we are going to talk about, the typical forms of masculinity, which we'll refer to later as hegemonic masculinity, but it's only going to be in a section because, like I said, we want to focus on what being a black man is about.
Yeah. So, you said it pretty well. So, let's jump right into it. So, first question, how were you taught to be a man?
All right. I was taught to be a man in a way that was, it's different because you and I were raised by mom, and with our mom just had this approach where no matter what happens, you'll be all right. Like, if you're alive, you'll be okay. If you're even if you're bleeding, you hurt something real bad, like, in the end, you'll be all right. Our mom told us this, and this is why I'm bringing up mom first, because, she taught us you'll be all right, no matter what. Like,
yes.
Whatever. And, that translates over into stop crying because you'll be all right. Don't worry about if you got hurt, because in the end, you'll be all right. It's not that we couldn't feel emotions or pain or something like that, because our mom was always like, oh, you'll be alright though. Come on, like, alright, that's enough. You'll be alright. Like, and you just learn to kind of truck on. Now, that's the approach our mom had. Then society tells you what being a man is like, and you follow the norms of what trying to be a man is like. But if you're a black, especially, you realize that some of the standards that they have doesn't necessarily apply to you. Every version doesn't apply to anybody, whether you're black or white, but it's just kind of how you take your interpretations from there. Like, which road do you fall on? Which part of the hierarchical ladder do you fall on? How much of a man you are based off of your own ideas and what society tells you who you are. So what about you? Like, how were you taught to be a man?
I never considered the thing Mom taught me a lesson on how to be a man. I took more of her teachings as how to be as a person. When I wanted to figure out what it meant to be a man, I honestly looked to mans in society, whether it was my peers or TVs and movies. Like most people, I had to learn what it means to be a man from watching other men. Mm-hmm. So that's where I got my interpretation. And I guess the reason why I never fell into the typical man was simply because I compared how Mom taught me how to be and versus what it meant to be a man.
Well, I kind of thought that for a little while, but then, I realized, things aren't exactly, they don't line up as well. Yeah. So, like, for instance, we have a little sister, and that whole you'll be alright thing. Mom doesn't do that with our little sister so much because she's a girl and everything should be worse, so she's allowed to feel more. Yes. That's why I took it as a masculinity thing. But also, it wasn't just the you'll be alright thing, I learned what it was like to be a man based off of her ideas of what she thought a man would be as well. She would tell us all the time, you should be like this, you should do this. A man should be able to take care of his family. A man should be able to earn and take care of himself. Yeah. And then she kind of took that as a difference. She said it was a difference between being a boy and a man, but it's also the difference between being a girl and a woman. It's so for that it was a more of an adult thing. Taking care of yourself means you have to be an adult. Yeah. But being a man meant you had to take care of your family as well. You had to be able to provide, even though she was kind of like raised in and even an older version of what it was to be a man.
And also by a woman.
Yes, and also by a woman. She kind of took the generic staples of what was supposed to be a man like, what being a man was supposed to be like, and she applied it to us as well. She had no idea what she was doing, but she did what she thought was right.
Yeah, another example of where I learned how to be a man was from my father. He wasn't in the picture much, but when he was, he threw some lesson my way. And one of the things that he taught me that I actually ended up keeping was a man is supposed to be strong and tough, and it's like he can't really express emotion because, and the reason why he told me was because you'll be weak, and I hated to be weak. So that's something that affected me until younger adolescent years.
For me, Dad didn't do that much for me. I mean, he told me those things, and he continued to try to tell me those things, but in my mind, I already kind of discounted him because he wasn't around so much. So it's like, for me, he was an example of who not to be. Mm-hmm. So, yes, he was my father, but I was, like, if I was going to be a father, I was going to be better than him. I would just not do the things that he did. And the same honestly kind of goes for being a man. Because he always talked about how strong and fearless you had to be and all that. But I didn't believe for a second that he wasn't ever fearless, So for me, like I said, my mom was just the best way to go as far as what an ideal man should be, in my eyes anyway.
That's interesting.
I mentioned it earlier, and I just kind of threw it out there earlier, but I guess I'll explain it. I mentioned something called the hegemonic masculinity theory, and I didn't say it exactly that way. I just said hegemonic masculinity. But
hierarchy.
Yes, and hierarchy. But hegemonic masculinity theory basically states that there's an order, a ranking system of what it is to be a man. The closer you are to being the ideal man, the higher you are in the man rankings.
Yes.
So being a man's man is includes facial hair. The more facial hair you have, the more social capital you have. The higher you are on the ranking system. That's hierarchy that I was talking about. So it's a theory that I don't even remember who developed, but it's basically what we're talking about. The hegemonic masculinity theory is about, it's the typical forms of masculinity that you're familiar with. So being the man's man, facial hair, being strong, no emotions, all that stuff. That's all hegemonic masculinity.
And it changes depending on time and culture. Like during monarchy, it was the fatter you were was a great sign of wealth and power. So women were more attracted to just fat men, not necessarily strong with muscle, just fat, because you had a lot of food.
Yes, but that was also a class discussion as well, not just a man discussion. Because either way, a man is always supposed to be strong and fearless and decisive. That's the other thing too. If you ever talk to someone and be like, girls don't like guys that can't make up their minds. That's all hegemonic masculinity. Yes. All of that stuff. Guys can be indecisive, but in the face of women or in the face of a crisis, everyone looks to you, the man, to figure things out and to get everyone through it. That's the hegemonic masculinity that we're talking about. So that's just basic masculinity within our culture. So a black man specifically, then black masculinity to us is different than hegemonic masculinity. It does have similar things, but I feel like there's I
think ours is a more to the bone version of it, and it's this is hard to describe.
Now, I feel like it's different things. It's not just being strong and being stoic and being emotionless. It's also providing for your family, being there for your kids, which is still part of hegemonic masculinity.
Not for
but you also, that's what I'm saying. It is, but it's also different because they have this rebellious aspect that they have to have, absolutely.
That's why I say black people's masculinity is more of a samurai version of general masculinity.
Kind of. To me, the parts line up.
Yeah.
But then you have the added aspect of being rebellious on top of it. You have to not work for the man. You can't ever be within the system, and you can't ever follow the rules or do things right. It makes you look weak, even if being smart is a thing. You could be as smart as you want to, but if you do all your school work in school and
you're
stuff like that,
to the man.
You're
sheep.
You're kind of like you're an Uncle Tom all of a sudden because you're smart and you're educated and you listen to school rules. And that's the type of masculinity that I definitely want to address while we're talking about this, because it's super hurtful to black males. How do you expect them to ever get out of the ghetto and the hood and to make something of themselves and to be more if all of a sudden, if being successful, being intelligent and listening to the rules within the system makes you a sellout?
Yeah. You know how many times I got in a conversation with a black person and I'll talk about science or something and you're like, where'd you learn that from? A book?
Yeah, it's some type of insult. That's ridiculous though, because hegemonic masculinity, the white form of masculinity does not belittle that. You can be smart and you can be strong and all this stuff like this, but there's no rebellion in it because they want you to follow the rules and be within the system as well. But black men want you to work outside the system, get around it, never submit to anyone, and that's just not the way the world works. And that's why I feel like a lot of people end up into drugs and doing illegal activities. Hustling is what they call it. To a black male, being able to hustle is very important, but hustling is illegal.
It is.
So it's not necessarily a bad thing to barter and to get the things that you need if you can acquire those things within the means. But when it's literally valued to be able to go around the system and go out of your way to get it without using the system, then you have a problem, because then it makes you a criminal